Okay, so hopefully that's the last glitch, but we'll see. All right, so I wanted to come in here, right mouse click, and do my git bash here, and just tell it, again, I could do it from the regular terminal too. I'm just going to say npm start. All right? And I want to show you why React is so popular. And it's not the only thing that will do what I'm about to show you. All right? So, when this is up and running, right there, all right, I'm going to come up. I don't want that up and running like that. So I'm going to show you both of these. Okay? Now, you already know what's in here because I showed it to you. So again, if we look, this says, notice there's curly braces here. This says grab whatever has been defined as logo and basically put it there. That's this. All right? Here it says edit, and it's got code, source app.js code, and save to reload. That's this. And then this right here is that hyperlink. Does that all make sense? All right. You don't have to do this. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to grab all of this, and I'm going to just put in here, I'm going to put an H1 tag in that says hello from React. That's all I'm going to do. And I'm going to save, and you see how fast it updated. All right. That's one of the virtues of using this, is the fact that it's got more of the look and feel of a desktop type of app. All right? So, like I said, that's all I wanted to show you. If you've got yours up and running, you can actually just close it down. You don't even have to save it if you don't want to. All right? It's not that big a thing. I just wanted to be able to show you the different components that were in there. All right? Okay. Now, with that said, I sent all of you an email before class started. And I think it's called Part01 React. So I'm going to extract that, and I'm going to bring it up here because there's a couple things that I want to show you that are in there. All right? Notice it's got to do vanilla.js, and I'm not going to lie to you. I grabbed something off the internet, and that's what we're going to use. Not now, but later. But what I want to show you now is this. It says day 01, React URL.text. All right? These are what I'm going to start to go through right now. So I didn't save them for you. All I did was I gave you a list of the URLs from which I'm basing my conversation. And hopefully, at least, that makes at least a little bit of sense to you. So I'm going to start with this one. Just start right from the top. We had no internet this morning after everything that went on yesterday. And then we had it, but I couldn't use the Rankin network. So this is the first one. It's very short. It's like 3 pages long, and it's called Getting Started with React.js. So you'll see how small it is. All right? But you're not probably going to remember most of this, but at least you will have heard the terminology, which is what I'm most concerned with right now. First of all, may or may not have known this, React was written by Facebook. All right? Just like there's Twitter Bootstrap, there's Facebook React. All right, notice, it is a very flexible and efficient JavaScript library for building user interfaces. All right, and that's true. That's what it is. I'm not going to sit and read to you. But here are the basic components. When we looked at that app, I told you that app.js was a React component. So components are either functions or classes that ideally are designed to do one thing. Right? That's their job, just like a regular function in a programming language. All right? Now again, you can do those either using what are called class-based components, or functional-based components. And as I think I already mentioned to you, that in the past it was class-based, but the move has been towards functional-based. All right? One of the nice things about creating these components, too, is you can make yourself a library of these components and plug those components into different React applications if you want to or need to do so. All right, so those are components. Next is the virtual DOM. You all know what the DOM is. It's the document object model. All right, and notice there it says virtual DOM. Well, when we had to write JavaScript code to manipulate the DOM, you had to use the get element by ID and the if you wanted to add HTML, etc. There was all sorts of stuff you had to do, and it was and is kind of a pain. All right. What we want to be able to do is every time anything changes on the page, we want just the stuff that's been changed to immediately be reflected on the page, and that's it. So rather than us having to write a lot of intricate JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, all right, we write React code which manipulates the virtual DOM, which manipulates the DOM. So this virtual DOM is kind of like a go-between, and it uses AJAX, asynchronous Java, and XML to only update the parts of the page that need updating. And that's one of the reasons it's so darn fast. All right. When you work with React, you're working with what's referred to as a declarative language. All right. It says it's very easy and it manages its own state. All right. In one of these articles or something that's online, I don't remember what it was, but they said what they likened this to was the following. They said, imagine that you've got a new house. All right. And with something that's declarative, you can go, as an example, you want a bookcase. All right? You can go to a place like IKEA. You can grab any color you want, any size you want, etc. So you're in control of managing what that bookcase looks like. In a non-declarative language, all right, typically what you use in a framework, you got to do things a certain way. In here, you don't have to necessarily do things in a certain way. Now, if you remember, one of the things that we talked about way back in the days of AWD 1000 was that when we were starting to write websites, we talked about the importance of taking our HTML and separating it from our JavaScript and separating it from our CSS. All right, and how important that was. Well, in a way, at least somewhat, that's kind of thrown out the window here, because we're going to, at times, do some combining of all three in one file. All right? When you go and you add the equivalent of HTML right inside of your JS file, you may or may not have noticed that, but I was in a JS file and I put regular HTML in there. I put a div in, I put an H1 tag, and it all worked. Because it's not true HTML. All right, it's something that's called JSX. Now, this particular article says that it stands for JavaScript XML. All right, other ones will say it stands for JavaScript extensions, or there might even be other things that it stands for. It's not that big a thing, but as it says here, it's a mixture of both JavaScript and XML. What does that mean? Well, again, if we go back here. This right here, let me go back to, that's an XML tag right there. All right, and it's a self-closing XML tag, basically. All right. All right, so as it says, React is ridiculously fast, but the idea, again, is that it gives users the look and feel of a desktop application. Whereas, it may not seem like a big thing, but what we're moving towards, and I think I mentioned this to you last week, is the idea of creating what's called a SPA, a single page application, where you basically have one page and you just throw whatever it is into that page that you're asking for. So what's the difference? Well, what we've been doing so far, when you think about it, if we had a website like several of the ones we've created before with a home page, an about page, and a contact page, that's 3 pages. So every time you have to go and create a new, or you have to make an ask, so you click on the about page link, then you click on the home page link, then you click on the contact page link. That's 3 different requests you made to a server. With a single page application, once you've loaded it into the system, the server doesn't have a lot of work to do. Most of the work is done on the client side, which is one of the reasons it's faster, and it actually is, it's a better way of doing things. All right, so now I kind of laughed when I read this because it says, why React? Easy to learn. That's true. Compared to other frameworks, it's easier. I think when you start learning it, I'm not going to say you're going to think it's easy or you're going to think it's hard, but I guarantee you, you'll think it's different because it is. All right? But one of the reasons that React is popular is most people agree that it's easier to get up and running than Angular is and than Vue.js is. All right? Now, what we're going to be moving towards, and not very long, is something that's called the MERN stack. MongoDB, Express, React, and Express, React, and Node. All right. There's also a mean stack, which is Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. All right. I don't know if there's one with Vue in there, like Maven, but there probably is with that too. All right. So as it says, with the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in place, you're ready to get started with React. Now, the recommendation is that you have a good knowledge of those and that you understand some ES6 stuff. Some stuff like functions and arrow functions and some of the other stuff that we've gone over. Why? Well, just so you see this, all right? For example, if we wanted to, we could go back to this right here and we could write that as an arrow function. All right? There's absolutely nothing stopping us from doing it. But what you'll find is most of the stuff in here, they use the more old-fashioned type of function declaration syntax. All right. Plus, one of the examples that we're going to start going through after the break, that's what they use. All right. So we're going to just keep with that, at least for now. All right. It's popular. It's used by lots of people. It's used by lots of companies. And the good news is, I don't think that you're ready to graduate from here. It's, I want to be a React developer now. But you at least have that in your tool belt. All right? And hopefully that gives you more of a leg up than a lot of other people do or have. Now, we're going to write React, but you can also write React Native. What's the difference? React Native can be used with Android, iOS, etc. So you can write mobile apps using it as well. My guess is eventually the class that you 3 will be taking in spring will become a React Native class. I'm not sure if it will or not. I got to talk to Mr. Smith about that and Mr. Gudmisted, but I'm going to guess that's what is going to happen. All right. So the setup. It says there it's incredibly easy to set up. We already have Node. We've already got NPM. So this is what we ran. npx create React app, the name of your app. It says after it's completed, you go into that directory and you type in npm start. This is what we saw. All right. So again, there was nothing really, for lack of better words, I'd call surprising about that. All right. Questions? Anybody? Anything that doesn't make sense? All right. So, like I said, I'm just jumping around here. So this is, I'm going to go into this one now. This is called 10 Things Every React Developer Should Know. And again, not my intention here to read to you. All right? Now, there are differences between a framework and a library. A library typically, for example, is more like Express was, where it's more unopinionated, where you can do the same thing in multiple different ways. With a framework, typically there is a way of doing things. All right, the reason I'm telling you that is React is a library, as it says here. It's not a framework, but it is JavaScript. So every time we create one of these new components, which is what we're going to start doing almost right away, there'll be a .js file. All right? React returns JSX. You already saw that. All right? That it returns that. Inside of that render method, we had a return statement. All right. Now it says in React, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS often work together. So you'll have all three of them in the same component. You don't have to. Sometimes it's advantageous to do that. All right. In fact, they call JSX HTML syntactic sugar. So in other words, what's really happening behind the scenes is that it's writing HTML, but it's writing it in a way that if we did it like that and wrote straight HTML, it wouldn't work inside of a JS file. So we put this coding or this wrapper around it, and that's why we're able to do that. All right, once we get going into this, you can pass data in React. When you pass data in React, what you pass in are known as properties, or even more often than not, props. All right, and you can pass in anything any component needs in order to do its job. I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. You can read this if you're interested in it. Okay? All right, next. All right, it says one benefit of using React is using state instead of complex DOM manipulation. So in other words, the state of an object, the object is responsible for its state. What does that mean? Well, look, here we've got a thing here called useState. All right? And we're passing in eating is false, food name and it would be nothing, and food price. So we're passing in information into it. And when you think about it, when you work with any language in an ideal world, in any computer programming language, the idea is it wants to be stateful. In other words, all right, in other words, whenever you run something and you ask for something, it should be available to you. All right, if you want to create something, you should be able to create it. And again, this will hopefully make more sense as we go on. All right, I'm going to hold off on the rendering. We sort of talked about it with the virtual DOM already. Okay, it says handling events in React. It's similar to handling or updating events on the DOM except for syntactic differences. Look at the difference right here. This is how we would do something in straight JavaScript with that example. href equals onClick equals. So what's different here? We put it right in the button, and notice, again, that's one place where the particular caseness matters. All right? You can do things conditionally, meaning if it's true, you do one thing. If it's false, you do something else. And you can do that with multiple components. All right, I'm jumping through this kind of quickly, but I just want to make sure that you've got some kind of an idea of what's going on here. All right, and again, after the break, our break might be a little later today, but after the break, we're going to go through and we're going to do something where we're going to start from scratch and build something together. All right, so next, difference between a framework and a library. I'm not going to spend any time on this other than to tell you if when I just mentioned that, a framework versus a library, if you didn't understand it, this is an article on that from Free Code Camp that goes through the differences between them. If I go down to the very bottom, frameworks and libraries are both code written by someone else that lets you perform common tasks. A framework inverts the control of the program. It tells the developer what they need. The library doesn't. All right? And if you remember a long time ago, I gave you the example of if I said, you know, if I put a bowl of fruit up here and it was the first day of class and it was an Art 101 class and I said, paint this. And if I didn't tell you what to do, I just said, paint this, that would be more like a library. If I said, paint this, make sure that you put in the container that the fruit is in, make sure you show every single piece of fruit that's in there and you show it right in the order that it's in, that's more like a framework. All right? Okay. Next, I got this thing on some fundamental concepts. And again, I realize that at least some of this will be repetitious. But you know what? This is my opinion. That's a good thing. All right. So this is what they say. React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. All right. It's declarative, efficient, and flexible. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It, again, allows you to use this virtual DOM. So what they're showing in here is this is what you change. The system looks at it and says, what's different from this as opposed to the real DOM? And it only grabs the things that are different and sends those off to the real DOM. So the virtual DOM is, basically its job is to hold the differences between what's currently in the DOM and what you've just changed in the DOM. All right. Components, again, as it says, in this case, they're a JavaScript function that returns a React element. That's what a component actually is. And the name of the component should be the same name as the name of the file. And that's one time where that should be in uppercase. You may or may not have noticed, but the app.js, the A in app was in uppercase. However, the file, the index.js, that's not a component. So the I in index was not in uppercase. So the files that you should have that are components, those should be in uppercase. Non-component files should not be. As it says, a main benefit of components is that they're reusable. All right. JSX, again, we already talked about it. Here they call it JavaScript extension. So again, it just depends on the book that you are reading, etc. All right. And as it says we do not create an HTML element by our own directly with HTML. Rather, we use this intermediate language. And that's what JSX is it's an intermediate language. All right. And again, if the system needs information provided to it, you provide it, as you can see right here, is what are known as props. So props basically are whatever parameters the component needs in order to be able to do its job. All right. State we've talked about, as it says, the state contains data specific to a component that may change over time. And when we've talked about state, you may or may not remember this, but we talked about it in terms of object-oriented programming. And I use things like height and weight. All right. Right now, your height isn't the same as it was when you were born. Your weight isn't the same as when you were born. Those are things that change over time. Your state has changed over time. All right. Inline styling, and this sometimes at least gets to be a little bit confusing. You may or may not have noticed this, but if I jump back into here, you'll notice if you look in here, let me close a couple of these. In fact, I'll open this one. And notice that inside of our source, we've got an app.css, we've got an index.css. Why do we have more than one CSS file? This app.css is everything for your app component. It's just the stuff for the main component. This index.css affects the entire application. All right? That's the main difference between the two. Style components, as it says, it's a library for React and React Native that allows you to use component level styles. Yeah, so it allows you to do even more CSS. All right. So it says a component is a template. It can be a function or a class. An element is what gets returned from a component. There's weird rules about this, about this language. Sometimes you can do things a certain way. Sometimes you can't do things a certain way. Sometimes caseness matters, sometimes it doesn't matter, etc. All right. And the last thing they mention in here is they talk about this context API. I'm not going to get into that right now. It's another way of passing information in. All right. Like I said, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to hopefully I'll be able to get done with all of this by around 1:15, and we're going to take 15. So this next one here is, it's a beginner's guide, building front-end applications with React. All right. I thought the lady who wrote this did a very nice job of explaining stuff. All right. So if you want, I've got things in there, I'm not going to bring all these up, but I explain the difference between declarative and non-declarative types of things. You've got them in there. All right? So they talk about why you should learn React. Well, look at this. The blue is React. It's trending upward, and it continues to trend upward. When you look at libraries on Stack Overflow and you look at inquiries, etc., about libraries, React is number 2. Number 1 is still jQuery because there's still a ton of jQuery out there. All right, but as jQuery, as its popularity continues to wane, the popularity of React continues to improve. It says it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that React would become the future of front-end development. These are some of the companies, I'm not going to read them, but these are some of the ones that are using them. All right. So, some benefits, again, saving time, fairly simple to grasp and learn, uses the virtual DOM, says it's got declarative programming. All right, so there's the difference between declarative and imperative. Declarative is what React has, where you declare what you want, versus imperative, where you tell the browser to do something. All right, the code typically can be as neat as you want it or need it to be. You're going to see that after the break. All right, React keeps getting better. It's got a large ecosystem, meaning that since millions of people are using it, it's kept up to date. All right, and I was watching this video yesterday, and the guy was saying on there, it might even be one of the ones we watched today, I don't know, but the guy was saying on there, say what you want to say about Facebook, but they've got to have some pretty darn good developers for being as popular as they are, continuing to be as popular, being in many ways as innovative as they are, etc. All right. As it says, it can boost your website's conversion rate by 200%. I already talked about the React Native. All right. It says, what should you know? Well, HTML, CSS, DOM, JavaScript, Node, NPM, you know all that. But probably the thing that we're all weakest in is the ES6 stuff. All right. It says you must be acquainted with concepts like objects, arrays, classes, etc. All right. Now, there's different ways that you can do this. As they say, I could have had you go into CodePen and just start writing this. All right. But we did it the other way. In other words, we already had Node. We already had NPM. So we did the NPX. That's right here. All right. And after a while, it built all this stuff. We went into and started writing code in our editor of choice. And again, in most of these, what most people are still showing is Visual Studio Code. And I've already shown you to do the NPM start to run this, and that it runs by default on port 3000. All right. That's it for this one. So this I'm not even going to bring up, but again, if you want to know the difference between NPM, all right, and NPX, you can look at that one that's right there. They have this, and then they have the guy who does it. It's a 9-minute long video on it too. All right. But basically he just says, for those of you who don't like to read, now I'm going to basically tell you what the differences are. All right. If you want to know the difference, what declarative programming is, you can go look at that one. All right. Let's just quickly look at these last 3, and then we're taking a break. All right. So this first thing is called Getting Started with React. This won't take long. These are not long articles, and much of it, again, is repetitive. All right. Now, the only thing I read through this, I have no problem with anything Bawantha or whatever that is said, except that they said that after the 3rd iteration, they said, now keep looking for for part 4. There is no part 4. All right? So they go through this, and they give you some of the key concepts. The reason I wanted to bring this one up is this one goes into what a spot is when you look at it right here. All right? So it says when we talk about JavaScript apps, we're usually talking about SPAs, a single page application. So rather than what you typically have, which is every time that you ask for a page in a quote regular website unquote, you're making different requests to the server. But with a SPA, it's more like this. It's a one-time shot. Now, that's one of the good things, but there's bad things about spas. Since it's one page, technically you don't have a back button. Does that make sense? It's one page. Also, one of the ways that search engines figure out how good your site is or is not, they use search engine optimization. So they go and look through all of the pages that you have for your site. Well, if you only have one, it makes SEO harder. All right? So if you want, you can read through this. Here's some more stuff on the virtual DOM. But again, like I said, this is stuff I've already shown you. All right? Here's some more on components. A little bit more on JSX. And they go through some different stuff that's in here. Like I said, most of it, it's not that it's not irrelevant, but a lot of it is stuff that'll make more sense after we get into it. All right, so here was part 2 of that series. How to set up React on Windows. We've got it all done. We've already got Node. We've already got NPM. They tell you to install Yarn. You don't have to, because they want you to do that, and then they want you to install Create React App. I already mentioned you don't have to do that. All right? You can just run it. Okay? And we did the NPX. That was it for that one. And the last one, which I think probably does a better job than I have done, and that is explaining the folder structure. So if you didn't like the explanation that I gave you, or you thought it was incomplete, you can go through this, and it explains the setup and what every single file that's in there is. All right. We didn't have the yarn lock. We had our NPM lock, and it says don't change anything. Well, we don't change anything in there either. So if you want more on the public and on the source than I gave you, or than you think I gave you, this is where he says stay tuned for part 4. There is none. All right. So I'd like you to do one thing, and then we're taking a break. We're actually going to do something, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works with making these recordings. But I want everybody to go out to a website right now. That website is, let me put it in here, and I'll make it nice and big. Again, you don't need that, just scrimba.com. All right, if yours looks like mine that says don't waste $15K on a coding boot camp, you're right where you should be. All right. Now, what Scrimba is, I have been a non-paying member for years. They've got 2 tiers. They've got a free tier, and they've got a paid tier. All right. I didn't realize, being in there in the free tier, that some of the classes they gave me for free, eventually when I went back to them, they're now paid courses, so I can't look at them anymore. Now, if you go in here, and you might have to arrow down a little bit like this, but see where it says create account? Like I said, you might have to arrow down in the upper right-hand corner, click where it says create account. I'd like you to create one, please. Feel free to use whatever email you want. I'd recommend your Rankin one, but if you don't want to use your Rankin one, then don't use it. Remember your password, of course, and click sign up. It should be almost instantaneous that it'll tell you that you've got everything. All right? And then you get like a welcome message or something. I'm just going to log in. Now, when you look on here, if you take a look, here's my courses. Now, a lot of these, because this is ones I've done over the years, I haven't done most of these lately. But notice that when I did this, for example, there was a building a movie search app in React. All right, you can see I went through the whole thing. There were 13 lessons, in fact. This is one of the ones that Keegan and I went through, all right, last year. But now when I click on it, it says, hey, now it says, well, go to lesson. It says, oh, you need to be a subscriber, and I'm not. It's $30 a month to subscribe. By no means am I telling you to subscribe. All right, I am not saying to subscribe. Now, you may have to go and look in yours, because I'm not sure how it is with a brand new one, but what I want you to find, and if nothing else, I'll give you the URL. All right? And we're going to start going through the one that is right here. Learn React for free. We're going to go through all 59 lessons. All right? And if you look right here, just look on my screen, you'll notice there are 59 lessons. I think the longest one is about 10 minutes. The shortest one is about 3 minutes. All right? Now, if you can't find that, you should be able to go right here. So I will put that up. Knock the size on this down a little bit. All right, you should be able to go out to here. Again, you don't need that. If you go out to here now, it should bring you to where I am. Hopefully it does. Learn React for free. All right? It is 112. Let's come back. I'm going to make it 127 that we're going to start back up again. All right? The first day then, we may end up going till 2:30 instead of 2. We'll see. But I've got a place where I want us to break when we get done. We're going to end up watching a lot of these together. All right? So come back at 127, please.